Welcome to Scribbles on Scripts. So, built-in objects in JavaScript. There's a few different ones, but one of the most common ones are arrays. They come with a bunch of functions that make working with them easier. Iterating, sorting, filtering, and more are at your fingertips. The potentially tricky part is that these functions tend to need a callback function. And unless you remember everything you've learned about how function arguments work and have carefully read the documentation, they can seem a little magical. And not the good kind of magical. So let's take a closer look at this sorcery. Before we get started, we'll quickly go over what we mean by callback functions. Hopefully you've heard of them before, but essentially they are functions passed to another function as a parameter. The function then calls the callback at some point. You can definitely write your own functions that require callbacks, but chances are you will spend most of your time writing callback functions and won't have easy access to the function that will eventually run your callback. This is exactly the case with built-in objects like arrays. So how do we know that this function on this built-in array will run our callback function properly? Especially if we can't see how it was written. This is where the Mozilla Developer Network web docs come in. If we look up the built-in object we're using, arrays, we get a bunch of information, including details about all the functions available to us. A lot of this will be reachable from that instance methods section. So let's look at forEach. It's one of the more straightforward instance methods that still uses a callback. The MDN docs tells us that it will call our callback function once for each element of the array, and it tells us exactly how it will call it. It's going to pass it the current element of the array, the index of that element in the array, and the entirety of the array itself. So that tells us how to set up our callback function. Our first argument will be the element, second the index, and last is the array. Now, if we remember the rules for writing functions, we know that we can technically call these whatever we want when we define it. We don't have to stick with element, index, and array. It's the order that's important. Let's look at this side by side with a simple example. Our function here takes two arguments, name and position, and displays some text using both. The same way that here we can call hello with person key and spot, even though when we defined hello we used name and position, the built-in function will call our callback with element, index, and array. And we can name our arguments whatever we like when we define it. The other thing we have to remember is that you can just call functions with extra parameters. As long as the ones the function uses are in the expected order, everything will turn out fine. There's a problem if we mix up the order though. If we try calling our hello function with an extra parameter at the end, our function runs just fine and nothing is done with that last parameter. This is exactly what the built-in function does. It always calls the callback with element, index, array, and if we don't use one of those parameters, that's absolutely fine. So let's try it out. Let's take the hello function we have and use it as a callback with forEach. We'll need an array to call it on. Since we are just saying hello to a given name, we should probably have an array of names. And we can call the built-in forEach with our hello function. Remember that we don't want to actually call the callback ourselves here when we are passing it in. The only parentheses here are for that forEach, not the hello. The exception to this happens when you define the callback function as you are passing it in. But that's a topic for another video. Thanks for watching.